Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebell. And in this episode, we're talking about the most underrated kettlebell lift. It's a gateway lift, it's a safety lift, it's a strength builder, and it helps teach ballistic precision. It gets ignored because it looks simple and is overshadowed by the swing, the snatch, the press, the jerk. Well, the list goes on, Roger. And I'm talking about, well, we'll be talking about the clean. So, there's a lot of things we got to cover with this lift, and I think I basically told you why you might suck at it. So let's make them better. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. A gateway lift is like marijuana.
Yeah, it's you start doing this lift, and then all of a sudden you're hooked on snatch.
Okay.
Okay.
Whoa.
We got to stop doing that.
We're running out of the gate today.
All right. We got the clean, Roger, and we were talking about what we're going to pick, and we decided this was the one when we were thinking of the next logical step. We've covered the swing. Can you tell us why the clean matters and help frame this up for us?
Sure. I'm probably eventually. I don't know that it's
now's as good a time as any.
Okay. I don't know that it's an easy answer. For starters, I think it's a lift that if you're looking at your basic, 6-7 kettlebell lifts that most people know and do, you're going to have a hard time if you don't know how to clean. And I guess we can just start off with our experience when we were, first going through our Strong First certification, level 1, before we really had a solid idea what we were doing. I'm not going to speak for you, but I do think that you had a similar experience. And what I will say is going through the prep that we were going through, the hard part wasn't the lifts per se. It wasn't the strength. It wasn't the cardio. It was my elbows. It was my wrists. It was my forearms. It was just feeling like, how can I tolerate just one more slam against my forearm or yank on my elbow? It was awful. And it was because I didn't know how to clean. I thought I did. I didn't know what the problem was. And I was looking past the basic lift that was a precursor to so many other lifts that I was doing. And I was focusing on presses and snatches and all that stuff. But I was screwing up the clean. And in the process, I was hurting myself. So I would say first and foremost, the prevalence of the lift within the system that should be reason alone to be willing to fix this, to really work on it.
Yeah, you sort of can't get anywhere without it.
No, I mean, you have other reasons. It's become my favorite lift, that or the press. If I were going to do, I've said this before, if I were going to do 2 lifts, it would be the clean and the press. If those were the only 2 I would pick. It gives you remarkable physical benefits. It builds your legs. It builds your midsection. It builds a strong back. It really does help so many things physically. But there's also, I'd say one other big thing is that if you short the clean, if you're doing them sloppy, if they're not crisp, if they're ugly, when you're going through your standard kettlebell workout, you're missing out on maybe even a third of your, of your work. If you're just focusing on the presses and you're not focusing on the cleans, if you're doing a 2-hand clean when you don't need to, if you're never experimenting with heavy cleans, I think that you're missing out on a lot of solid work and you're shorting yourself. So I would say those are the 3 biggest reasons right there why I would learn to clean. Right. Not to mention all the other lessons you learn, for the other lifts. And I guess we're going to talk about those as well.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I would say the clean is very tricky to learn. And it seemed to be one that until we finally figured out that we needed to figure it out, we went through those sort of things, those elbows and these. And oftentimes I see a lot of just flippant cleaning. Okay. You're just going to I'll just get it there somehow. And like you said, we will cover some of these common things that come up. But yeah, it's a voyage. And my favorite skills are the clean and the jerk. So we're similar in that way, Roger.
Yeah.
We both
twins,
like the clean.
Twins pretty much.
Yeah. Same dad. So that's how we can be related and not look too much alike. Okay.
I'll have to tell my mom this.
Yeah, tell her what's up. All right. So first, I think to make this more effective, let's talk about some of the things that can go wrong, because there are going to be some common errors, and most people will tune in and be like, well, okay, if you think the clean is so great, what are some things I'm doing wrong? So, all right, what are some things that are wrong with the common clean, Roger?
All of it.
Yeah. Number one, I think we agree, and we talk about this in several episodes, but I want you to elaborate on it, and it's not using enough legs. And I kind of alluded to that in the flip it clean comment, but
you do need to use your legs. Like any ballistic lift, in order to make it ballistic, there has to be a moment when you are accelerating the kettlebell up faster than gravity is pulling it down. It gets a little more complicated than that. There are degrees of ballistic, but for a simple definition, there needs to be a moment of free flight. So you could break down any ballistic lift into multiple phases and make it as complicated as you want. But you could just look at a ballistic lift as having a force production phase, which is where you're jamming your feet down into the floor. That ultimately, in conjunction with your starting position, is what's going to make a ballistic lift move. And then you're going to have a free flight phase, where if you have generated, the technical term is impulse, the proper impulse, not just hard enough, but fast enough, then that kettlebell is going to start zooming up, and it's going to break free of gravity's downward pull for a moment. In order to have that second part go right, you need to have the first part go right. And that's why we're always talking about drive your legs, drive your legs, drive your legs. A big part of that is the hips. A big part of that is what happens with your pelvis, and there's torque and there's all kinds of things going on. But our preferred cue is to drive your feet down hard, because the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. Whereas if you're thinking about shooting your hips forward, you're missing out on the floor, which is the thing that ultimately makes you move. So we don't want to do that. We're focused on leg drive here, because without the leg drive, you don't have the engine of the lift. You don't have the thing that makes it go. So the number one issue with any ballistic lift, other than balance, other than stance, is going to be not driving your legs well. There are some other things that can go wrong, but this is one of the most common things that I see. And I think one of the main reasons for that is people rush ahead. You'll watch people, let's say, do a swing versus a clean. And when they're doing their swing, they get their bodies or their arms along their body. They're reaching way far back into the backswing. They're really loading up the glutes, the hamstrings. They're driving their feet down into the floor. And then it's clean time. The bell doesn't start as far in front of them. They don't get back into that backswing position very much. They get a tiny little leg drive, nothing really to be proud about. And then they're over pulling with their arm. So that right there, that's one of the main reasons for it, I think, that people just don't know. They just don't know that they've got to use the legs. The other reason being, sometimes when you use too much leg, and sometimes this is a coaching error, that bell gets away from you and you have a hard time pulling it. So if you're trying to generate the same kind of leg drive you would with a swing, where that bell is really, really launching forward, then you're going to run into some trouble. And you and I have had a conversation about this whole idea that all of your ballistics, at least your swing-based ballistics, are going to look the same. Do you think they look the same? Your swings, your cleans, your snatches?
No, I don't.
Well,
but
they shouldn't. Yeah. You have 3 different destinations, and the simplest way to look at the physics, if you're going to a different destination, you should have some changes to make that lift efficient. And efficiency is defined by the amount of work or the amount of energy that you use. We want an efficient lift. Why would we do the same thing with our legs if we, let's say, want the bell to swing? So ending up at the end of our arms versus up in the rack. It doesn't quite make sense. So the proponents of this, where you'll hear they're all swings or a version of a swing, they just end in different places. You hear them say that, and then you watch them do a snatch, and their stance is different. You watch them do a clean, their stance is different. Yeah, there's a little vertical pop in that clean that you can't take away from people who are really good at that. And very few top tier coaches admit that, and they're telling you to do the same thing, and it's just not quite right. So that's the other end of the spectrum. Either you're using your legs too much and you're trying to crush it like a swing, the bell's getting away from you, then you have to overpull, which hurts, or you're rushing past it. You don't realize you got to get far, too far back there, or far back there, and really load the thing up, and then you don't have the propulsion. You don't have that whole first phase, the force production phase, to be followed by that ballistic phase.
Got it. So in learning to adjust the leg drive, you're going to rid yourself of some of these common things, or like where you're trying to curl the bell up, or you're really upright rowing it, crashing it into your arm. And you got that first part, Roger, the leg drive. And you said, well, if you go too hard, you got to pull it back to your body. Well, what about if you're pulling too soon? I see that as one of the most common problems. So what does that mean? When is too soon? If letting it get far away from you is too late, when is the too soon?
We have a choice. We can either look at video and we can say now, which we don't have, and we're not going to do. Okay. If you have a video, cue it up. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Last I checked, we don't have that technology momentarily. The second thing we can do is we can talk about a sequence of events as they should happen. Again, this is a simplified version, but when you're looking at cause and effect, when we're breaking down the clean into like any ballistic lift, we're going to break it down right now into two phases. So a force production phase and a ballistic phase. So step one, you need to start with your balanced stance. You need to connect the bell to your body somehow. Ideally, you're not just grabbing the handle, but as much of your arm, your upper arm, your forearm, your wrist is in contact with as much of your body as possible. So that can be the front of your ribs, the side of your ribs, the belly area. Sometimes you can get your wrist all the way down near your pelvis, your inner thigh. That's going to depend on anthropometry. So how are you built? So get a good stance, connect the bell as well as possible, and then stand up not just hard, but fast. What that's going to do is it's going to get the bell accelerating upward, which is ultimately the direction you want it to go. And it needs to accelerate upward faster than gravity is accelerating downward, at which point that bell is going to be ballistic. It's going to have what we call a float. There's going to be a moment where it's going to feel pretty much weightless. The only thing that you might feel is the bell wanting to pull away from you, but it's not going to be pulling down at the moment. It's going to be pulling out. Okay, so that's phase one. You've got to get a good balanced stance, connect the bell to your body, crush your feet into the floor, not just hard but fast. Now we're imagining in slow motion here. So that bell is beginning to float up. You should have already begun to pull the bell to keep it close to your body. When you make arm to body contact, when you make that connection, let's say you have the bell in front of you and you're hiking the bell, you shouldn't just let the bell go back and then drive your legs. You should continue to pull to keep that arm close to your body until your legs, your knees and your hips are fully extended. And that's going to look like that standing plank position or standing up. That's when you can let that arm really disengage. Okay. That's the first pull, pulling it close to your body. Because if you don't pull it close to your body, that bell can get away from you. That's a problem. So that's the first pull we need to think about. The second pull is going to be a redirection. If you were to let the bell do what it wants to do at this point, it's going to do some version of a swing. It's going to move forward, and we don't want that. We have a different destination. Once the bell is going up faster than gravity pulls it down, you can pull whenever you want. But your legs have to have already had that impulse. What a lot of people are tempted to do is not pull until the legs are completely straight. There's merit in that thought, because when your legs are completely straight, that means you've had all of the force that you can produce. There's a relationship between force and distance. So the more distance you cover, the more force you can produce. So think about, common analogy we use, a bow and arrow. Imagine the arrow coming away from the bowstring before the bowstring is gotten all the way back to its resting length. right? We don't want that arrow to come away too soon because we're missing out on force. That being said, if we wait until the very end, it's going to be really difficult to direct that bell. So when you really look closely, there's probably going to be some redirection or some pulling already happening, which is totally fine. You're still going to get the force from the legs to bring the bell up, but you're going to start pulling that bell back and into position already. So there's a second pull that happens. So we want to realize we've got those two phases. We've got the force production phase. We've got the ballistic phase. The ballistic phase, when it's kind of floating, that's when you want to manipulate the bell. If the float or the ballistic phase is defined in a way by the bell feeling weightless, meaning it's moving up faster than gravity can pull it down, and without the influence of gravity, we don't feel the effects of weight the same way. Mass is mass. The 24 kilo bell is not going to get lighter, but if it's moving up faster than gravity's pulling it down, it's not going to feel heavy. So do you want to move the bell when it's light, or do you want to move the bell when it's heavy?
Yeah, definitely when it's light. That, it's all, what do we say? Efficiency, right?
Sure.
The least amount of energy possible to do what I need to do.
Absolutely. So we want to move the bell when it's light. So we get it moving up fast enough, and then we're pulling the arm along the body. Now, when I connect my bell for a clean, I'm reaching pretty far back there. I've got my wrist on my pelvis, and I find as I'm moving up, I don't need to tug necessarily the arm straight back. I'm kind of pulling up and back at the same time. And as I'm standing, that's when I'm going to probably have more of almost like, it's going to look more like a 90-degree angle in my elbow. Yeah. That's when you're going to get that pull that people talk about, that people teach about, but it's that sliding the arm along your body that I think a lot of people miss. And that's why sometimes that clean is clunky.
Yeah, where it gets away and bangs on you.
Exactly right. It is going to get away, and then you've got to pull it back. But it stands to reason, if the bell never gets away from you, then you're not going to have that issue. So
land nice.
The second pull begins by you sliding your arm up. If you're to practice this, if you're listening to this, I would try this. Go down into your backswing and imagine standing up as you were pulling your arm along your body, and do not break contact. Only when you're completely standing should you give that elbow a really sharp tug backward. Before then, you're pulling both up and back. So you're delivering the proper impulse to the bell. It's moving up. It's weightless. You're sliding it along your body and getting your arm ready to pull, pulling the bell along with you a little bit, which is easy because it's weightless. Once you fully express your force by straightening your legs, you give it a really quick tug, and that bell is going to move around your hand. That's going to be followed to a degree by you bringing your arm forward and catching that bell.
Getting that hand inserted right into the handle, basically.
Sure.
And then it's going to give you that nice soft landing as opposed to pulling and slapping around and getting that bruised wrist that everybody cries about.
Yeah, and that might seem like a lot. That might seem like complicated. It really is not that. It's not that complicated. It's basic stuff. And when you feel it, you're like, oh, that's what he's talking about. But until you don't feel it, it's So strong leg drive, pulling the arm into the body, letting that arm pull right along the channel, from your, basically there. If you look at your inner thigh, there's going to be a groove that you're creating where your the inside of your wrist can just kind of ride in that groove as you're pulling. You can even do it in your lap. Okay. If you reach down, I know if you're watching this,
not too
filthy,
much.
I'm good with it. If you shake it twice, you're playing with it.
The views went way up, more than twice. Right?
Anyhow, but you could reach down into your lap, and if you put your forearm almost parallel to your inner thigh, and you feel your arm on your body, you can slide that arm along your body, and you can feel that contact. That's what we want.
It's like you've evolved or were created, depending upon what you think, to do kettlebell cleans.
Clearly. So
it's what we're here for.
So part of the problem with the clean is understanding what it is you should feel, understanding that you should feel weightless. The first thing to do though is to commit, crush it with your legs. I would much rather the bell get away from somebody and you have to pull it back in because that's a much easier problem to fix than you never having enough leg drive and then you're trying to curl the thing or use your back or whatever. Yeah, that's one is much easier to fix than the other. So step one, if you get nothing else out of this, drive your legs hard and fast and crush the floor with force. So understanding the lift will make it easier to execute. And those are the main parts where things go wrong. Failing to drive the legs and not understanding those pulls in there.
Yeah, I have another one. I think part of where the clean goes wrong is that most people, and I'll exclude us because we've seen the light, Roger. We've gone better ways. Most people don't really practice the clean, as in, I'm going to do sets of X amount of reps to get better at this skill. It's sort of like, oh, I'll just do it when I'm going to do my press, or maybe I'm doing a half snatch or something like that. When you're just putting it in there as just a afterthought or just a precursor or just a sort of like, this as a necessary evil, when the reality is it can be a real thing. And oftentimes, if you can do this, if you can do double bell cleans, that's a solid workout all in itself. I have people that don't even swing. They don't like to swing. They're like, nah, I'd rather not do it. I go, well, guess what? You can double clean. It's going to elicit similar effect, and probably I would say maybe even get you a little bit stronger.
I want to throw in one more thing, and I think we were going to talk about this later, but we might as well talk about this now. And there is a common clean cue that I think screws people up, and it might be my least favorite cue in kettlebells. It's zip up the zipper.
Oh, don't let the cows out of the barn sort of thing. That sort of zipper.
So people will talk about zipping up the zipper and, thinking about the bell coming straight up. The merit in that cue, because we don't want to just talk trash, or, I understand where it came from. I just think that there are problems with it. I think the merit in that cue is that you want to encourage a vertical bell path, and generally zippers are vertical. Mm-hmm. The problem is the clean is not a vertical lift. It's a diagonal. It is more vertical than horizontal. But if you have this intention, and this is where stupid people like me, when you tell me a snatch is a swing that ends overhead, I'm going to do a complete swing and bring it all the way overhead. So my snatch...
Pull it up there.
Yeah, my snatch is pretty much straight up until I realize, oh, wait, that almost broke my wrist. I'm not going to do that. Anyhow, the problem with that cue is, one, it's a diagonal, okay? But two, from a sensory motor standpoint, what you are cueing is hand movement. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you zip up a zipper. I use my hand.
I use my legs, Roger. I use my legs for everything. I drive my zippers up.
Yeah, I don't get into the backswing. I don't do leg drive and pull in a diagonal to zip up my zipper. In fact,
I love that.
In fact, unless you're wearing like a old school Michael Jackson jacket, your zippers are not diagonal. They're okay. So we need to realize the bell is going to go from in between your legs to outside of your arm. That's a diagonal path. So if you emphasize that diagonal, that you're pulling up and then back, you can see that diagonal start to emerge. But not only that, again, when you're zipping up your zipper, you're cueing your brain to think about your hand and movement. And we have seen studies on this where what you think about, how you think about movement influences which muscles you use. So you start using things like your hand, your wrist, your bicep. It's far more likely to cue a bicep curl. So what I see with the zip up the zipper cue is a mediocre leg drive followed by a lot of hand and a lot of arm. Okay. So that's why I don't really care for that cue. There are a few coaches I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is embarrassing. Stop that. Well, I'm zipping up the zipper. Like, no, like you leave your zipper down. If this is what we're dealing with, like leave the zipper alone. But this is how you clean a bell. So
what if you got button flies on?
This is a common enough problem where I do feel the need to mention it. And again, food for thought. How you think about a movement influences how you move. So understanding the baseline conditions under which a lift will happen, cause and effect, understanding what needs to happen, the sequence, when, and then start thinking about, generally it's a good idea to think about muscles closer to the center of the body rather than farther away. And it's a good idea to think about bigger muscles rather than small. If I'm doing a pull, I'm not going to take my bicep out of the equation. My bicep's absolutely going to be working. So are all the muscles on my wrist and my forearm. But there is a difference in both the bell path, the angle of my elbow, the rate at which it bends when I'm thinking about pulling with my lat, my big back muscles, as opposed to pulling with my elbow. And if anyone's listening to this who's coached people, very commonly you see this when you do something like a low cable row, when the machines where you're sitting flat on the pad and your feet are up. If you're thinking about pulling with your hands, what you're going to get is a very fast closing of the elbow angle. And what should happen, in my opinion, is you should think about pulling your arms back next to your body. The angle of the elbow is going to change, but it's going to change more gradually. It's going to change slower. And the result of that usually is a stronger lift. So the zip up your zipper cue is a problem. And I think it's because, again, it teaches the wrong path. It cues you focusing on your hand rather than focusing on your back, which is what I want you to do. And if you think about just putting your arm straight out and then pulling your arm into your body, you can feel how it wants to move in a slight diagonal anyway. When you push your arm straight forward, your arm is going to be closer to the center of your body. And as you move it to the side, it's going to be farther from the center of your body. Not a lot, but some. And when we cue our natural tendencies, it's much easier to do.
What about you hear this a lot, and it's, maybe my clean is banging because I'm gripping too tight or something like that. I think this is something that gets sort of tossed out there as well, as like, oh, if your clean's banging, you're gripping too tight. Is that a thing, or is the fix something that we've already discussed?
I don't think it's a thing. And I've done multiple tests, both with cleans and with snatches. And I've got a pretty decent grip, not the strongest, but stronger than most. And I grip the bell as hard as I possibly can. And I think it stands to reason. If you're comparing me to a brand new kettlebell student who's much smaller, not as skilled, my grip is probably going to be stronger. So these are the people you're saying, hey, you're gripping the bell too hard and it's clunking. Well, I'm gripping the bell as hard as I possibly can. And when I use proper mechanics, it doesn't clunk. So it's a simple test to do. If you know how to clean, grip the bell as hard as you possibly can. And I've never gotten that once. What I think is happening is there's a break in the chain, going back. And if you still don't have this, go back and listen to the first part. I know nobody's going to do that, but really understand, if you're driving the bell with the legs and it's weightless or near weightless, and then you're doing the proper pulls at the proper time, and one part leads to the next part, leads to the next part. That bell's not just free floating. It's being moved along seamlessly in one smooth sequence. So if there's a clunk, there's something wrong with that sequence. In my experience, it's usually the leg drive, but it could be the leg drive is just fine and you're letting the bell get away from you, and then you have to jerk it back. So rather than one smooth sequence, it's two separate things. And I think that's usually where the clunk comes from. But again, I've gripped the bell as hard as I possibly can, and not just one time, but several times. In fact, with snatching, this is something we've heard about for years. And then, one coach in particular, I believe Tim Allman was who started the snatch where you get that grip. Really, really deep grip. Yeah. And you didn't see clunking there, right? That wasn't a thing. Now
that's as grip as you get.
Yeah, exactly right. So, some of the stuff is we hear it and we repeat it and, oh, it must be that. And, sometimes as coaches, people succeed in spite of our stupid advice rather than because of our good advice. So that's one of those things. But yeah, I don't think the clunk is that. I think the clunk is either failure to drive your legs well, or you're not sequencing one thing into the next. Even think of it just as something simple like a relay race. Some certain things need to happen, and you got to hand off that baton from one runner to the next, to the next, to the next, and that has to go seamlessly, or there's going to be a problem.
Yeah, you're kicked out of the Olympics. One of the things, one of the things that is a common error in cleans that can be, I think, fixed pretty simply, Roger, and you tell me if I'm wrong. So say you have this clean that's getting away from you, and maybe you're doing, I don't know the most effective way to say this, but like you're hinging more of that hinge, the less of a knee bend sort of backswing, where if you're finding yourself in that position when you're looking at it, and I know we don't always like to coach by shapes or certain times, but I do know that because we want this clean to be that vertical force trajectory to get it to go upwards, if you're just going to maybe bend those knees a little bit so your knees come forward a little bit more and you're having less of that backswing, you can get that vertical to happen a little bit easier. Is that going to be one thing that'll help the people out there fix that sort of getting away from you sort of thing? Or is there, can you describe why the clean is not necessarily swing?
For sure. I do think that's accurate. If you think about it in a really, really simple way, if you want the bell to move along a vertical path, is it going to be easier to pull this kettlebell with your arms to ensure that it is vertical, or is it going to be easier to use your giant leg muscles and add a little bit of more vertical to the lift? And I would say it's easier to use your legs. And that this gets a little tricky because we do see a relationship between force and distance. And really it's force and time, but in order for
time
things
is
to
distance.
Essentially that's not always going to be true, but for our simplified purposes it will be. If you want to have a good forceful clean, especially if you're cleaning a big bell or you're cleaning double bells, you're going to need to get back into the backswing. Some people might look a little bit more torso horizontal to the floor. That's going to be build, but that shouldn't be your intention. There was a long time that everybody needed to get, torso parallel to the floor. I just don't agree with that. There are a variety of reasons. We've probably done another episode where I've rambled on about that. You do need to get back there, but you want to think more of a 45-degree angle if you can. Get as low as you need to go. And then as your hips have come forward, as your pelvis, if you imagine yourself in a side view and there's a green line shooting straight up through the center of your feet. The farther that pelvis gets back behind your feet, you're going to generate torque through the femurs and the pelvis, and that torque is going to be something that's going to move the bell. That's not going to be all, though, because we do need the bell to move in an arc, but we also need some substantial vertical force to help move that bell. The vertical force is both going to anchor the feet, but it's also going to give that bell a little bit of a pop. So one thing I like to think of, maybe it's kind of silly, but imagine, I don't know if you've ever done this. I have. Have you ever been in a place where there was an air vent in the ground for whatever reason? And you could put like a plastic bag or something over it and just kind of shoot things up in the air.
Or you could be an attractive blonde in the 60s and stand over it with the dress on.
Yeah, I've never worn the dress, and I've never been an attractive blonde. So yeah, sucks for me. But that's the idea. So, I almost think of the bell as when it's moving, over that spot on my feet, I drive my legs, I give it a little pop, and it's almost like that little thermal lift. So that's going to be that, or like the blowhole of a whale, or any number of things that I could probably name that are at least slightly inappropriate.
That's
but
good.
We're thinking about a sudden shot, a big jolt of air or liquid or whatever that's going to help the bell get more vertical. So you do need to get back there, or you're not going to have enough force to move your bell. But you do want to remember at some point the legs will help turn the direction of the bell. Okay, because it's not going to be just a straight 45 like it would be with a swing, right? It's going to be a little different. It's going to need to go up, and it's going to need then to move out toward the outside of your forearm. So it's kind of a weird shape if you were to trace it. If you were to just point, put a line over the center of the kettlebell and watch where it goes, you're going to be drawing a really, really strange squiggly line.
Squiggly lines rule. So what about this one, Roger? You're going to have a really crappy press if you don't have a good clean. Is this more a testament to what I mentioned earlier, where you should practice that clean so you can get comfortable in the rack and finding your rack, the right rack position for you? Because we've talked about this before, and to kind of link the clean to the press is that rack position. And so when you clean it, you're not landing in that vertical forearm that everybody, is sort of taught up in. Maybe it's early on in your kettlebell life or wherever, but they talk about this vertical forearm where you're kind of getting it right in there. So is that all just in the pull, or to get that rack position good so that you can press right? Or do you want to think about sort of the bell size when it comes to where you're positioning that rack for off of your clean?
You're going to want to think about a little bit everything. You're going to want to think of the bell size. You're going to want to think, meaning the mass. You're going to want to think about individual bells. You can have 3 32-kilo bells and they're all going to land differently. I just recently got a 44-kilo bell somewhere off the internet. Different than the brand I usually use, but it was available. The other ones weren't. And one side of the bell is flat, which completely changes the way the bell sits. So you're going to have some individual differences. I think that one of the most important things with the clean is understanding where to grip it, how to grip it, where's the handle, or when your arm is moving into the backswing, are your knuckles parallel to your body? Is your thumb turned back? Is your pinky turned back? There are a lot of things to consider. You want to be able to clean a bell so it lands smoothly and comfortably, so it's sitting on your forearm. You're going to want to clean a bell so it matches where on your hand you should be pressing. We've talked a little bit about this with the press before, but and we've cited a great article that Brett Jones wrote on what's called radial and ulnar deviation. Just basically when you put your hands up, do your thumbs turn in, or are they more neutral, or are your pinkies out, right? That's going to determine where you want to grip the bell. It might seem like a silly thing until you really understand training in general, specifically barbell training. Yeah, I was just earlier today, I was doing some barbell presses. And
how dare you?
I was doing my first set and I was a little distracted, and I knew my setup was off, but the first set just felt so hard, and my hands were a little wider than they needed to be. So the force transmission didn't go up from my elbow into my hand. It went out at an angle a little too far, and it didn't allow me to get my elbows forward of the bar. And you need to be able to get your elbows forward of the bar when you're pressing just a little bit. So where the kettlebell lands matters, because if you're thinking about all the segments that you're going to use to produce force to clean, you're using the shoulder, okay, and the humerus bone, the long arm bone, sits in the shoulder, but that's going to really express itself at the elbow. So where your elbow is matters. So if you're doing this kind of wonky clean and your elbow's up here, or your elbow's too far in, or your elbow's too far back, that's going to matter. And then where your elbow is in relation to the kettlebell and how your bones line up, that's going to matter as well. So I think it's more about the grip. But there are also some other factors. There's just the simple, are you really fiddling around with your kettlebell, especially you're doing a heavy press. When I do really heavy presses, I just do a 2-arm clean and I'm done. I'm not worried about the 1-arm clean anymore, because the goal is the goal, and that is to push the kettlebell straight up. So don't mess with that too much. But if you're doing a heavy clean or a heavy press and you're cleaning it, you're bouncing around at the top, you can't really get a good solid grip on the bell. It's not landing comfortably on your forearm. It's not in the right part of your hand, meaning it's not more toward the thumb side or the pinky side. And how are you going to do a heavy press? You're exhausted just getting the bell into position, and then you got to lift this big thing. So there's definitely some truth to that. I think it's a cop-out that a lot of coaches use, but the really, really good ones understand you do need a really solid clean if you're going to have a good press, and you need to figure out what that is. The short answer, though, is trial and error. Try different things, figure it out.
To your point, if you're not sure, you can grip a little more towards that front horn You can grip a little more towards that back horn. You can grip a little more in the middle. You can, and like Roger mentioned, you can go thumb back. You can go pinky back. You can go
in the backswing specifically.
In the backswing, yes, yeah, in the backswing, and you can go parallel handle. If you don't know every time you press kind of what you're going for, this is a good time to do that and practice that skill. Not every kettlebell session needs to be the complex you saw off the internet so you can just get really sweaty and breathe really heavy, because you can do that with cleans too. All right. The clean, is there anything, let's ask this, Roger, real quick. Is there any other common things that we haven't discussed where the clean sort of goes awry? I feel like those are a lot of the main ones, and how to make it. Is there something we're missing?
I think those are the main ones, and there might be some other things that are escaping me at the moment, but we're going to really start getting into nuance and individual context, and that's going to be less helpful for the 10 people who are listening to this. So let's.
Well, it's more than 10, and for you, 11th person, you win yourself a free high five. Well, let's go ahead and put a bow on this. One of the things that you can do to help your clean practice is, one, practice cleans. All right. If you suck at them, do them first when you're fresh. And when you got the most, I guess, what did you call it? Neuromuscular connection. I don't know. Some fancy thing where you're using your brain and your body together. Utilize that when you're fresh. Okay. Well, not when you're exhausted and thinking about it as an afterthought. Learn that control, learn the amount of leg drive you need, and know that once you get this clean, you're going to be able to be better at a lot of the other ones. And I know we're going to do an episode on the snatch in particular, because Roger, we'll probably discuss this more in the snatch, so don't get too into it. But you think it's easier to learn the snatch over the clean. Am I right with that?
I do. Both lifts can have a lot of nuance, and it will take time to perfect them both. But I think the snatch is harder in that it requires more force, but I think the path is a little simpler for a lot of people. So it's not uncommon for me to get someone who's really eager to learn the snatch. Okay, let's learn the snatch. Now let's go back and let's really fine tune the clean. Interestingly enough, and when we do an episode on the snatch, we'll talk about this, but there's some important lessons that you learn from the clean. And if you had learned them before moving into the snatch, your snatch would have been better. So often the snatch is it's the carrot I dangle in order to clean up the clean. It's like, hey, we have done most of these big moves. And when you go out into the world and you're bragging about learning kettlebells and you tell people I taught you, I don't want those cleans to be representative of me, because those hurt my feelings. So if you want me to keep teaching you, you got to get better at this lift. So usually they're sufficiently motivated at that point, and then we can clean up the cleans and like, oh, this is so much better. Mm-hmm.
And life's good. Oh, I think we'd be remiss, and maybe we can cover this in a final few minutes here, but you got to get out of the clean sometimes, right? So there's a couple ways. I think the best way, the way that we teach, so if you're going to go out there and represent some iron revival aspect, we like to talk about, as you're sitting there in the rack, you're essentially pulling a pillar out from underneath. So you're going to slide that elbow back along your body. And at that point, now gravity is going to do the bulk of the work for you. And since you've already dragged your arm along your body, your arm is halfway to connect it already. And then it's a matter of going down and connecting. I know there's some people who like to do, what do they call that? Where you toss it out there. I don't even know. Casting. Yeah. Like you're fishing. All right. This isn't fishing. Sometimes people cast. Now, Roger, is there any one way that's the best? What if people cast? Should they do it the way we talk about? Let's add that to this.
It's just a different style. Casting is a fantastic way to add a little extra momentum in the lift, and it's generally associated more with sports style, which is why we don't talk about it. We do hard style. So, the cast is fantastic because you are trying to save energy. You're trying to move as long as possible. And what you're doing is you're getting more potential energy for that bell to drop into the backswing, and it's fantastic. However, that's not what we do. So when you're doing hard style, what we're looking to do is we're training your brain and your body to make explosive movements. So one of the best ways to be able to train somebody is to have a kettlebell that starts in that rack position and keeping it close and then shoving your hips back so fast and so hard in order to do another lift, whether it's a clean swing or snatch. You have to learn how to generate that force very quickly without a lot of distance, without a lot of runway. So both ways are going to have merits, but the hard style is going to be more what a lot of people call power oriented, or learning to generate that force quickly. So both are valid, but you can feel like you mentioned with that arm connection, you can feel that arm going back along that groove. Okay. Up and down. You want to hit that groove, and you'll find, okay, I got to stop doing this. It's going to look obscene, but you will find that
start charging for this video.
You will find that you'll get that natural diagonal happening, and that is essential if you're going into the hard style. One of my clients calls it the unclean, which I really like. The clean and then unclean.
The unclean. I do like that. All right, so drive those legs, pull that arm against the body, slide it up along that natural crease, but don't be a creep. You hit that pole when the bell's weightless. You're standing up at this point, and you just slide that arm right underneath. Make sure you're getting the right hand position, so practice that. And while you're at it, just practice your cleans more. Single, double, hell, even triple cleans. Just kidding. I don't know what a triple clean is, but if you got what a triple clean is, leave it in the comments, and we'll try anything.
You'll try anything.
Yes, I'll try anything. Well, back in the day, hot sauce, wasabi, it doesn't matter. Anything else for this clean on this episode, Roger?
No, I mean, we could. There's so much on this, and we could keep talking, but I think we have. I think we have the basic points. If you're still stuck, comment. And if we need to make another episode or reach out to people individually, we're happy to do that. We're even toying with the idea of bringing people on and watching video and then breaking down technique, which might be a good way to do this. So if that's something you're interested in, you can reach out to us, or leave it in the comments. But no, I think we've, I think 45 minutes on the clean is enough for almost everybody on the planet except for us.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you made it this far, we appreciate you. And thanks for listening. Be sure to download the Bells app from the Apple App Store. It's free. And there's even workouts in the premium section that I call cleans and things, where you are going to get a clean practice. In fact, I'll make sure that that's in the December monthly premium. So download the Bells app. Be sure to subscribe, like, follow, and find out who your real daddy is. All right. Stay strong.
I think I just retired.
Bye.